What's up, freaks and geeks? We are going to jump into some horror themed goodness because it is officially spooky season. And as an avid fan of the genre, I always get the question, what? Where do I start? What horror movies do I watch? I want to get into horror, but I have no idea where to start. And a friend of mine recently came to me asking the big question, how do I get into horror movies if I've never watched them before? And it's tough because horror is very much like an ice cream shop. Horror is not one size fits all. You are going to find that you are going to have your own unique taste of horror. What do you like? What do you don't like? What are you cool with? What are you not cool with? There are things that I am cool with now that I wasn't always, things that I am not cool with now that I grew up on. And it's going to change over time. It's a buffet of subgenres. Some are creepy, some are funny, some are extreme, some jump too fast, some go too slow. And if you don't do it right, you can scare yourself away. Or you'll wonder why people find horror fun in the first place. So I built a roadmap, a step by step process that starts off spooky and fun and then gradually gets heavier and scarier and more intense as time goes on. Each one, each level unlocks a new branch of horror history because in order to really figure out what you vibe with, you've got to try different flavors to figure out what flavor you're into. So, whether you're a beginner or a seasoned horror nerd, this ladder shows you how you can climb your way through the genre from lighthearted witches to the darkest nightmares that horror can produce. Step one, the not so scary horror. So this is where you're wearing the training wheels. It's not pure horror, but movies that flirt with the genre in a safe and fun way. This is where you want to start, especially if you are trying to figure out how an up and coming horror nerd can get into this without getting super freaked out or, getting nightmare fuel right out the gate. So, examples of this would be Hocus Pocus, a Halloween staple, witches, curses, talking cats, all wrapped up in Disney comedy. It's spooky fall atmosphere without fear. Ghostbusters gives you slime, specters, creepy libraries, but you're laughing more than you're screaming. It teaches you that horror and comedy share a thin line. Jurassic Park, not usually called horror, but if we can call Jaws horror, then I'm calling Jurassic Park horror because you have dinosaurs roaming free and essentially acting as slashers the entire time. These movies let beginners get used to suspense, get used to thrills and monsters without trauma. They also establish horror logic, rules, rituals, and consequences. They're great for family or group watches, good for little ones, shared laughs that make scares easier. Bonus recommendations for this genre: Beetlejuice, Gremlins, and the Addams Family. Next up, we have the old school classics. Movies like King Kong, Dracula, The Wolfman, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. We're talking universal monster movies at this point. If step one is baby steps, this is history class. These aren't terrifying by today's standards, but they do a very good job of setting atmosphere and telling character driven stories. Movies like King Kong mix in awe and horror. The spectacle is the point. You're supposed to fear him, but you also sympathize with him. Dracula set the template for Gothic horror. Castles, candlelight, and the rules like invitation and sunlight. Bride of Frankenstein might be the crown jewel of this era of storytelling. It's witty, it's tragic, and it's heartfelt. It's horror with soul. Frankenstein is known as a seminal classic because it is the ultimate outcast story. Again, these films, we're not in scary, but that's what makes them perfect beginner friendly classics. They establish monsters as metaphors: loneliness, fear of the unknown, unchecked ambition. Watching these is like learning the alphabet. You'll recognize echoes of them in modern horror everywhere. Bonus recommendations here: Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Invisible Man, and Phantom of the Opera, 1925. Step three: Alfred Hitchcock. Now we enter suspense territory. Hitchcock wasn't a horror director full time, but when he touched the genre, he left his mark. He changed it forever. Some examples: Rear Window put you in the position of a voyeur. You know something bad is happening, but you are powerless to stop it. That helplessness is the core to horror. The Birds strips away explanation. The horror is literally senseless. There is no motive given. Why do the birds attack? It doesn't matter. They just do. And you are powerless to stop it. Psycho, it's a watershed moment. The shower scene is iconic. Even if you are unaware of horror tropes and seminal moments, you know the shower scene, you know that sound. But the bigger trick is killing the main character halfway through. That broke all the rules. It made audiences realize horror could betray your expectations. Hitchcock introduces the craft of suspense and horror storytelling, framing, pacing, and misdirection. He shows that horror isn't just monsters, it's paranoia, it's psychology, it's vulnerability. Psycho, in particular, is a rite of passage for horror fans. Mrs. Bearded Geek and I just saw it on the big screen for the second time just a couple of days ago. And let me tell you what, pound for pound, when you're talking about a horror movie, it may be, or at least it's in the conversation for the perfect movie. Now, you have to take it into consideration for the fact that it's 1960, but Psycho really sets the stage for what horror could become and did become in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, rolling forward. Couple of bonus recommendations for this era: Vertigo, Dial M for Murder, and Shadow of a Doubt. Step 4, creature features. Movies like The Mist, 2007, Jaws, and The Thing, 1982. This is where you welcome yourself to the beasts. These films ask, what if the world outside isn't safe anymore? The Mist traps people in a supermarket with monsters outside and zealots inside. It's less about creatures and more about what fear does to society. Jaws doesn't show the monster much. That's why it works. You hear the theme, you see the water, and your brain fills in the blanks. It's pure suspense. The Thing, it's paranoia incarnate. The monster can be literally anyone. The blood test scene is a horror masterclass in tension. Creature features are about two things: external threats and internal collapse. They're also a great bridge between mainstream audiences and horror fans. Big spectacle, but still scary. These movies teach you dread, anticipation, and paranoia. Bonus recommendations: Tremors, Cloverfield, and The Fly, 1986. Step 5, Werewolves. The Wolfman. Tragic story. He doesn't want to hurt anyone, but fate curses him. It is gothic horror at its most empathetic. American Werewolf mixes horror, humor, terror, and groundbreaking effects. That transformation scene is literally unforgettable. Ginger Snaps reimagines the werewolf curse as a metaphor for puberty and identity. Smart, subversive, and powerful. Werewolf films are about transformation: physical, emotional, and moral. Werewolf movies are one of horror's richest metaphors. They show horror as allegory, and these three movies that I talked about span generations, showing how the myth evolves with culture. Bonus recommendations: The Howling, Dog Soldiers, and Silver Bullet. Next up, we've got vampires. Vampires never go out of style. Nosferatu, a silent, eerie, and iconic, pure picture of nightmare imagery. The Lost Boys, sexy, fun, stylish. Vampires can be cool, is what we have to learn here. 30 Days of Night goes feral. These aren't aristocrats, they're predators. And The Long Night makes them terrifying. See, vampires reflect the era: disease in the 20s, sexuality in the 80s, savagery in the 2000s. They're endlessly versatile. They can be romantic, they can be monstrous, they can be tragic. They can even sparkle. I had to throw one in. Watching across eras shows you how horror adapts to society's fears. Couple of bonus recommendations: Let the Right One In, Dracula, 1992, Interview with a Vampire. And for bonus material, watch the 1920s version of Dracula as well. Step 7, Zombies. This is where horror can get dark. We start off this conversation, of course, with Night of the Living Dead. It created modern zombies, slow, relentless, and societal breakdown in a microcosm. Dawn of the Dead added satire, consumers literally devoured by consumption. 28 Days Later reinvented the genre with speed and rage. Same thing with World War Z. Zombies are flexible metaphors. They can mean racism, they can mean capitalism, they can mean pandemics. They show that horror doesn't have to be about individual monsters. It can be about entire systems collapsing. These three give you zombies across decades, showing how horror reflects the times. Bonus recommendations: Shaun of the Dead, even though it is horror comedy, Train to Busan, if you're looking for something far more intense, and Wreck. Step 8. This is where I grew up in the slashers. Now it's time for the icons. Elm Street weaponizes dreams. If you can't sleep, you can't live. Freddy can be funny, but terrifying all at once. A Nightmare on Elm Street is a rite of passage for horror movie fans. Friday the 13th is campfire horror, the simplest setup, but effective. Halloween is the slasher blueprint. The slasher movie formula was born off of Halloween in the most substantive way: music, shadows, and suspense over gore. Slashers are horror's rock stars. Simple rules, big scares, iconic killers. They are like the evolution of the creature feature. They're also a training ground. You'll see these tropes everywhere else. Slashers oftentimes become fun, but still scary in a roller coaster kind of way. The movie that you have to watch in this era, Nightmare, it's training wheels. Halloween, yes, that is, if that is the blueprint, then Scream redefined that blueprint. Scream was my gateway. That is the movie that made me a lifelong horror fan. But other recommendations are Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Warning, very gory, and Child's Play. Next up, we've got Aliens. Alien 1979, Signs 2002, Dark Skies 2013. When horror goes cosmic. Alien is haunted house in space. Claustrophobic, industrial, and iconic. Signs brings aliens to the backyard with family drama grounding the fear. Dark Skies, I really think, is underrated. It mixes alien abduction with haunted house tropes. Alien horror blends sci fi with primal fears, violation, invasion, helplessness. The settings, space, farmland, suburbs, prove horror can happen anywhere. Aliens force us to question what if we're not alone and they aren't friendly. Bonus recommendations: Event Horizon, Under the Skin, and The Thing from Another World. See, this is where horror meets other genres in a way that really unpacks everything that horror can and should be. The next step is haunted houses, paranormal horror. Few things are scarier than realizing your home, the place that you're supposed to be safest, is working against you. Haunted house films take that primal comfort and flip it into a trap. The Amityville Horror gives us the based on a true story haunted house motif. Whether you believe it or not doesn't matter. The paranoia it sparked turned the suburban dream into a nightmare. Poltergeist is a haunted house roller coaster. At first, it's playful, stacked chairs, static on the TV. It escalates into one of horror's most iconic family under siege movies. The Other is gothic perfection. Whispered dread, candlelit rooms, and a chilling twist that makes you question who's hunting who. Haunted houses prey on the idea of domestic betrayal. Your home turns on you. They often work with atmosphere and not gore. Creaks, whispers, shadows. The subgenre is evergreen. Every decade has its own haunted house hit. Bonus recommendations here: The Haunting 1963, House on Haunted Hill 1959, and The Conjuring 2013. Next up, we have Possession. Possession horror is where things get intense. These films often involve religious imagery, loss of control, and deeply unsettling visuals. Evil Dead is raw, chaotic, and soaked in gore. The cabin in the woods setup became a template for decades of horror. The Exorcist is still called the scariest movie ever made, not just for its shock value, but for the way it treats evil as real. The Shining shows that possession doesn't have to mean demons. It can mean madness, isolation, and haunted architecture. Possession films strip away agency. The scariest thing is not being in control of your body or mind. They're often some of the most controversial, being that they dig into religion, family, and mental health. If you can stomach these, then you're ready to advance. Bonus recommendations: Hereditary, The Omen 1976, and The Evil Dead 2013. Next up, we have series. This is where, once you know the basics, you'll want more. That's where you get into franchises. Paranormal Activity proved you don't need money to scare people. This was built on a shoestring budget, just a camera in the right place. Minimalist, effective, and heavy on jump scares. Yes, it gets into way more complex things. Not every single beat is a high moment, but all in all, I definitely think it's a series worth watching. Saw gets unfairly dismissed as torture porn, but the first film is a locked room thriller with a killer twist. The sequels turned it into a gore fest, but the original is clever and suspenseful. Scream, a self aware slasher. It's fun, it's scary, and it teaches you the rules of horror, all while breaking them. Franchises let you binge. Once you like one, you've got multiple sequels to chew through. They also show you how horror changes over time. Watching a franchise evolve is like a mini lesson in horror history. Some of these are quality roller coasters. Others dip along the way, but that's the fun part. Couple of bonus recommendations: Final Destination, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Psycho. Psycho especially really ranges across different subgenres of horror. Next up, you have the pseudo modern marvels. The Ring brought J horror to the US, and its cursed videotape imagery is unforgettable. The Descent, pure claustrophobia. Caves, shadows, creatures. The Conjuring reignited supernatural horror in the 2010s. Ed and Lorraine's cases became a franchise with mixed degrees of movies, but that first one really reinvigorated the subgenre. Modern horror tends to be faster paced and more polished, but these films prove that it can still be deeply effective. Each movie here represents a different style: cursed object, survival horror, supernatural. They also set trends. Everything from found footage to shared universe owes them. Bonus recommendations here: It Follows, Sinister, and The Babadook. Next up, you've got foreign films: Suspiria, 1977, A Tale of Two Sisters, and The Orphanage. Foreign horror often feels stranger, more intense, and more imaginative than mainstream American films. Suspiria is Italian horror at its peak: color, sound, dream logic. It's more like a nightmare painting than a normal movie. A Tale of Two Sisters is a Korean ghost story that is deeply unsettling and full of mystery. It's as tragic as it is terrifying. The Orphanage is Spanish Gothic horror: beautiful, heartbreaking, and haunting. Foreign horror often pushes boundaries that Americans avoid: graphic violence, taboo topics, and surrealism. Watching them broadens your horror vocabulary, and you start to see how culture shapes fear. These three are perfect gateways that show stylish, emotional, and unforgettable movies. Bonus recommendations: Ringu, 1998, Train to Busan, and Audition, 1999. I will warn you, this is where you can get into some pretty intense imagery. This is where you can get into some stuff that is more advanced than some of the movies that you've watched elsewhere. And this is where some of the safety rails are taken off. Now, next up, we have the advanced level. This is the final boss tier, not for casual viewers. These are some of the most brutal and shocking horror films that are produced. Martyrs, an infamous, emotionally devastating, brutally violent, but also strangely profound movie. It's a test of endurance, not just fear. High Tension is relentlessly French. It is high energy and gory and twisty and an intense slasher. Inside is a home invasion film that pushes things to their absolute limit. This is horror as ordeal. You don't just watch, you survive the experience. These films are where even hardcore horror fans can draw the line. If you make it here and you still want more, you've graduated. You are officially a freak of nature. Bonus recommendations: Antichrist, 2009, Possession, 1981. And that's as far as I'm going to suggest. There are others, but that's for you to find. So that's the horror roadmap. 15 steps, even each scarier than the last. You start with Hocus Pocus and you end with Martyrs. Along the way, you'll learn the tropes, you'll learn the history, you'll learn the icons, you'll learn the extremes of the genre. The big question is, where are you right now? Are you just starting off at step one, or are you already deep in the haunted house, working your way towards step 15? Drop your horror level in the comments. I want to know how far you have climbed. And if you want me to build a level 2 guide, let me know. Sequels, deeper cuts, hidden gems, let me know. And remember, it's only a movie until you turn off the lights. Peace, freaks.